All right, and we're rolling. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. If you're here, this is my first podcast. If you're listening only via audio, I'll also let you know that this is up on YouTube as well. If you have any interest in seeing my really messy hair and low production at-home studio here. Anyway, I thought because this is the first podcast I'm doing, and for a lot of you who might just be hearing me for the first time, I'll keep this rather brief, seeing that it's, our first contact, the first date. You usually just get coffee, and then you get to know people, and then eventually you go to dinner, then you go to a movie, and one thing leads to another. But anyway, yeah, I'll just keep it simple. I'll give you a quick story about myself, and then obviously with more emphasis on epilepsy and everything related to that whole area. So I was born in southern Los Angeles, kind of the Laguna Beach area. After about 3 to 4 years of back and forth between Los Angeles and Iowa, I was later moved to Iowa, or I guess the word might be like later on was kind of settled into Iowa. I was in foster care for about 6 months, my sister and I. And then after that sentence in foster care, we'll call it that because foster care is not a fun and loving place, we'll say. My grandparents adopted my sister and I, and this was in Iowa. So from age 7, my sister and I were raised in Iowa until 18, and then I went to school in Seattle, Washington, Seattle University. It's where I went to university. My sister as well. I did a little interesting flowchart while I was there. Went to a school in Minnesota for a year, as well as spent some time in Madrid, but ultimately finished at Seattle University. And I managed to graduate a couple classes early still. That's right. When you're raised by grandparents and they teach you the value of a dollar and how to be really cheap, you manage. But anyway, I just remembered I totally glanced over a very important part of this story. So my sophomore year of high school, which was 2011, that was when I got my diagnosis. My diagnosis is AVM, arteriovenous malformation, and that can happen in multiple parts of the body. I can't tell you the comprehensive, anatomy of where all of that can happen. But what an AVM is, it's when a vein and an artery don't align properly. They're supposed to align according to size. But sometimes what happens, and much like the case in my brain, it kind of looks like a vein the size or the diameter of an iPhone headphone, not an AirPod, an actual headphone, were to connect to an artery that's about the diameter of an extension cord. So what happens is there's a loss in blood and oxygen flow. And what happens with those structurally, what happens is those veins and arteries, due to that misalignment, they begin to nest up and create these malformations, hence AVM. And this can happen in a lot of areas of the body. And depending on the size, sometimes it can be surgically removed, radiated, embolized. However, in my case, because it's in the brain, it can be operated on and removed, but oftentimes that's if it's about yay big. For those listening, I'm illustrating something to the screen with the diameter of maybe a dime, but my AV malformation on the right side of my brain extends all throughout the entire right side. So there is no treatment option for it. And that is because AVMs are actually a cancer. They're tumorous. When I was first diagnosed, the guy who did my MRI said that he thought it was a really big tumor. And this was when I was at my local hospital before they sent me to the university hospital. And that's a whole nother story. I'll go into detail later if you guys want to hear. But yeah, that's what my diagnosis is. It's a really, really messed up connection and misalignment of veins and arteries across the entire right side of my brain, and therefore I am epileptic. So this might be controversial to some. I do not have epilepsy outright. I am epileptic, meaning I have seizures a lot. So the malformation is my main diagnosis. The entire right side of my brain is messed up. That's just the easiest way to put it. And due to that, I have seizures. So that was my diagnosis in 2011. We can get back to some of those details later, but as far as, brevity's sake in telling the story. So fast forward, we were talking about college. And then I had my first involuntary convulsive seizure my senior year of college, where the left side of my body went ballistic and started seizing like a fish out of water. Left arm started convulsing and then eventually made its way to my left leg as well as my head, making a lot of jerking movements to the left. And at an instant, the entire left side of my body went numb and uncontrollably started convulsing. Now, you might be thinking and marking some differences between what happened to me there with my seizure versus what a lot of seizures that people have. A lot of people with epilepsy outright, or whatever their case may be, they'll have a seizure, or at least what I've heard is that they'll pass out, they'll wake up postictal, and I guess they had their seizure and they seized and convulsed while they were passed out. Whereas mine, because I don't have epilepsy outright, my seizures are due to this malformation. I'm entirely conscious throughout my seizure. So I can feel all of the loss of control as well as the muscle spasming that's going on. And so it's interesting. I'm going to be curious to hear what questions other people might have about this going forward, because I'm aware. So there's the benefit of that, knowing that I can quickly, I'll have an aura. I'm sure a lot of you know you'll have an aura, and what I can do is I can quickly find a place that it'll be safe for me to seize so that there's no hard objects near my head, or warn somebody. The downside, obviously, is that I have to experience this painful jerking the entire time, and the incredibly high stress level, cortisol levels that run through your brain at that time, giving the fight or flight response that you're about to die. But you've got pros and cons with everything. So yeah, that was senior year of college when I had my first convulsant involuntary seizure. And then that kind of happened because that was when my epilepsy first really kicked up a notch and was turned up to 11 out of 10. And then seizures like that started happening on a bi-monthly and monthly schedule. And then over the years, I've been able to figure out why it is I was having those seizures. For example, when I was in college, I would have them because I was drinking too much or I was smoking weed. I lived in Seattle, so it was like nothing. Smoking weed, it was just what you did. And then I got involved in a lot of things to help prevent my seizures and live with it as well. I'm a registered yoga instructor, so I do a lot of my own meditation. I think I called this a studio, this podcast studio. It's really more of a fitness studio. I've got a spin bike right there, and I've also got a yoga mat with a block. That sounds really bougie, everything I said, but the spin bike I just got from an old roommate who left it at the apartment when he bounced, not letting us know, and he screwed us over a month's rent. And here I am now. I'm 25. I'm in New York. Still dealing with my epilepsy right now. I am doing a lot of physical therapy, occupational therapy, trying to figure out how to regain that neurological connection with the left side of my body, because since the right side has so much of this structural damage, what's happened is as I've had those seizures as well, the left side of my body has lost a lot of its muscle definition and connection to the brain, where I'll try and tell the left side of my body to do something and it just won't. So I'm doing that on a very regular basis now, doing my therapy, doing my exercises, and still having seizures, obviously, but on a much, more infrequent basis than when I was in college. I sure would hope. College was years ago. But more importantly with that, I think, too, is that the seizures aren't as bad. They're not as violent. They don't last as long. I recover faster. And I mean, I'm a war veteran at this point. I've had seizures in the water. Just a year ago, I had a seizure in the water, drank 2 quarts of water while doing that. I had a seizure while riding my bike in the middle of traffic. I had a seizure riding my bike down an empty neighborhood road at 1:30 a.m. in the morning. That was a fun one. I've had a seizure while I was at a bar on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, and thankfully I got out of there soon enough so I wouldn't have a seizure in a crowd of people. And then some smart guy who if I could have just, this guy came and sat on me because he said he was a med student and he thought that he was being the hero that day. He sat on me while I was having a seizure because he was doing the right thing or whatever, and when I told him get off of me, he got mad. So some of the people out there these days, I don't know. When I had my first inconvulsant seizure at my university, there was a bunch of underclassmen who took out their phones and filmed it. I had a similar situation with somebody taking out their phone just the other day. So that's what's up. As of recent, I'm trying to develop my professional career, my professional life and everything, while obviously putting most of my focus on managing my epilepsy, because it's better to do that when you're able-bodied and get that out of the way before you get too old. So that's my story up until now. I mean, I left out a lot of details. I'd love to hear your questions. If you guys want me to go over something in a bit more detail, I'll leave it there. Thank you for listening.